The moment the heavy oak doors of the private dining room swung open, every eye in the room locked on Tamara. She stepped inside, flanked by two of her father's men, wrists unbound, but heart hammering so hard she could feel it in her throat. At 21, she had imagined many futures. Graduating with honors, maybe an internship at the UN, but never this. Being delivered like the final clause in a contract. Her father stood at the far end of the long table, shoulders squared, but eyes averted. Across from him sat Shin Min-gyu. He didn't rise. He simply leaned back in the high-backed chair, one forearm resting casually on the armrest, sleeves of his black dress shirt rolled to the elbows. Fine black ink traced delicate, abstract lines along the inside of his left forearm. Nothing ostentatious, just quiet evidence of a life lived outside polite rules. Another small tattoo curved behind his ear, half hidden by the sharp line of his jaw and the neatly styled dark hair. His gaze lifted slowly, dark and unreadable, and landed on her like a physical weight. "Tamara," her father said, voice tight, "this ends the war. You belong to him now." No flowery speech, no apologies, just the blunt truth. Min-gyu's expression didn't change. He studied her for a long moment, the simple navy dress she'd worn to class that morning, the way her hands stayed clasped in front of her instead of trembling, the steady way she met his eyes, even though every instinct screamed to look away. Then he spoke, voice low and even. "You understand what this means?" She swallowed once. "Yes." He nodded once, the smallest movement. "Good." Her father exhaled, relief flooding his face. He bowed slightly, muttered something about paperwork, and left the room without another glance at his daughter. The doors closed behind him with a soft, final click. Min-gyu stood then, taller than she'd expected, presence filling the space without effort. He crossed to her in 3 measured steps and stopped just close enough that she caught the scent of him, bright yuzu cutting through the warm undertone of fresh espresso. Clean, controlled, dangerous in its restraint. "You will live in my penthouse," he said, tone flat. "You will finish your degree. You will not leave the building without my permission or an escort I choose. You will follow every rule I set. Break one, and the consequences will be immediate." Tamara kept her voice quiet, careful. "I understand." He tilted his head slightly, as if weighing whether her calm was real or rehearsed. "You're not crying." "I cried in the car," she answered honestly. It didn't change anything. For the first time, something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, or faint curiosity. It vanished as quickly as it came. He turned toward the side exit. "Follow me." She did. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent. When the doors opened onto a sprawling penthouse of glass and dark wood, he gestured toward a hallway without looking back. "Your room is there. Clothes have been delivered. Dinner will be brought at 7. Do not wander." He started to walk away. "Mr. Shin," she said softly. He paused, back still to her. "Thank you," she finished, "for letting me finish college." He didn't turn, didn't answer, just continued down the opposite corridor until he disappeared behind another set of doors. Tamara stood alone in the vast, beautiful cage, listening to the silence settle around her like snow. She had no idea that, in the privacy of his office, Min-gyu had already pulled up her university schedule on his tablet and marked every class she would attend, every route she would take, every second she would be out of his sight. He told himself it was only strategy. He almost believed it. Tamara woke to sunlight slicing through floor-to-ceiling windows, the kind of light that made the entire penthouse feel like it was floating above Seoul. She lay still for a long minute, listening. No footsteps, no voices, just the faint hum of the city far below. She rose, found the wardrobe already stocked with clothes in her size, simple dresses, soft blouses, nothing flashy, and chose a cream sweater and dark jeans. Practical, unthreatening. When she stepped into the main living area at 7 sharp, breakfast waited on the long glass table. Poached eggs, fresh fruit, toast, black coffee. No note, no one to serve it, just the quiet expectation that she would eat. She sat, ate slowly, noticed the security panel by the private elevator. Red light steady, locked. She didn't test it. At 8:30, her phone buzzed. A new contact labeled simply, "Driver." A message. "Car downstairs in 10. Escort will meet you at the lobby desk. Return by 6 p.m. No detours." She stared at the screen. College? He was actually letting her go. Downstairs, 2 men in dark suits waited. Polite, silent. One opening the car door while the other scanned the street. The drive to campus was 40 minutes of glass towers and traffic. Neither man spoke unless she asked a direct question. She didn't. Her first lecture was international law. She slipped into her usual seat near the back, notebook open, pen ready. A few classmates glanced her way, curious about the 2 large men who took positions at the rear exits, but no one asked. She kept her head down, took notes, answered when called on. Her voice stayed even, controlled. Lunch was a sandwich from the campus cafe, eaten alone at a corner table, while one escort stood 10 feet away, pretending to read his phone. She felt the eyes on her, not hostile, just watchful. Always watchful. By late afternoon, fatigue settled in her bones. Not from classes, from the constant awareness that every move was tracked, every breath measured against rules she hadn't fully memorized yet. When the car pulled back into the underground garage at 5:55, she was already counting the hours until the next day's routine. Mingyu was waiting when the elevator opened onto the penthouse. He stood near the windows, back to her, hands in the pockets of his charcoal trousers. The late sun caught the fine lines of ink on his forearms, where his sleeves were rolled again. Small, precise shapes that looked almost like calligraphy if you stared long enough. He didn't turn immediately. "You attended all classes," he said. Not a question. "Yes." "No incidents?" "None." He finally faced her. His expression was the same unreadable mask from the night before, but his gaze lingered a second longer on her face, on the faint shadows under her eyes, the way she held her bag against her chest like a shield. "Dinner at 7, he said. "Same rules." She nodded once, started toward her hallway. "Tamara." She stopped, turned. He took one step closer. The scent of yuzu and espresso reached her again, sharper now in the enclosed space. "If anyone at the university asks about the escorts, you say they are family friends providing security. Nothing more." "I already did," she answered quietly. They stopped asking. Something shifted in his eyes. Approval, maybe. Or calculation. He gave a single nod. "Rest," he said. "Tomorrow is the same." She walked away feeling the weight of his stare on her back until the hallway door closed behind her. In his office later, Mingyu opened the tablet again, pulled up the campus security feed from that afternoon, grainy but clear enough to see her sitting alone at lunch, shoulders straight, expression calm, even when her hand trembled slightly as she lifted her coffee. He watched the loop 3 times. Then he closed the file and told himself the tightness in his chest was only responsibility, nothing more. The message arrived during her afternoon seminar on global diplomacy. Tamara's phone vibrated once against her thigh. Silent mode, as always now. She glanced down under the desk. Unknown number. A single photo attached. Her walking across campus that morning, head down, bag slung over one shoulder. The timestamp matched exactly. Below it, text. Tell your new owner the old debts aren't forgotten. Park Ji-hoon sends regards. Her pulse spiked, but she kept her face blank. She locked the screen, slid the phone back into her pocket, and forced herself to focus on the professor's voice until the lecture ended. Back in the car, she waited until the escorts were pulling away from the curb before speaking. Someone sent me a photo. From today. They mentioned Park Ji-hoon. The driver's eyes flicked to the rearview mirror. The passenger beside her stiffened. Neither spoke for a beat. Then the driver pressed a button on the dash. Boss, she received a message. Photo surveillance. Reference to Park Ji-hoon. Min-gyu's voice came through the speaker instantly, calm and clipped. Forward it. Now. Tamara handed her phone over. The passenger connected it to a secure cable, sent the file, then returned it without a word. 15 minutes later, the car didn't head straight to the penthouse. It turned toward the river district instead, toward one of the sleek glass buildings Min-gyu owned outright. The escorts led her through a private entrance, up an express elevator, and into a conference room where Min-gyu already waited. He stood at the head of the table, charcoal dress shirt buttoned to the collar, dark tie perfectly knotted. The faint edge of a small tattoo peeked just above the crisp white of his collar. Nothing bold, only a thin black curve visible when he tilted his head. His forearms stayed covered today, sleeves neatly fastened at the wrists. He looked every inch the untouchable executive, yet the air around him crackled with restrained fury. Show me, he said. She unlocked her phone, held it out. He took it, studied the photo, then the message. His jaw tightened, but his voice stayed level. Park Ji-hoon was your father's former partner. He lost territory when the truce was forced. He's been quiet. Until now. Tamara nodded once. I've never met him. You don't need to. Min-gyu set the phone down. He's testing boundaries. Testing me. He straightened, looked at his men. Double the details starting tonight. Campus routes rerouted. No blind spots. Then to her. You're not returning to classes tomorrow. Her stomach dropped. I have midterms in 2 weeks. His eyes met hers, dark, unyielding. You'll finish the semester. Online if necessary. I won't risk you. She opened her mouth, closed it. Arguments died on her tongue. Instead, she asked, very quietly, Will this escalate? Not if I handle it. He stepped closer, close enough that she caught the clean citrus and espresso scent that seemed to cling to him no matter the hour. You're under my protection. That means no one touches you. No one threatens you. Not while I breathe. For the first time, she saw something flicker behind the ice, something fierce and possessive that made her breath catch. He turned to the escorts. Take her home. Stay inside the perimeter tonight. They nodded. Tamara followed them out, but at the door she paused, looked back. Min-gyu was already on his phone, voice low and lethal as he issued orders in rapid Korean. He didn't glance up, but she knew he felt her watching. In the elevator, she pressed a hand to her chest, trying to slow her heartbeat. Not from fear this time, from the realization that the man who owned her life had just drawn a line in blood for her sake. Later, in his office, Min-gyu stared at the forwarded photo on his screen. Her profile caught in sunlight, soft and unguarded. Something twisted hard in his gut. Anger at Ji-hoon, yes, but also something darker. The thought of anyone else watching her, photographing her, wanting her. He crushed the feeling down. Then he picked up his phone again and made the call that would end Park Ji-hoon's games before they truly began. Publicly, decisively. No one would mistake his message. The cramps started just after midnight, sharp and insistent, like a fist slowly closing inside her. Tamara curled tighter under the duvet, pressing a palm to her lower abdomen. She'd felt the warning signs all evening: dull ache, fatigue heavier than usual, but she hadn't said anything. Not to the escorts, not to anyone. Asking for help felt like admitting weakness in a place where weakness could be weaponized. She tried to breathe through the next wave, slow and even, but a soft gasp escaped anyway. The sound carried in the quiet penthouse. Minutes later, a light knock sounded at her door, firm, not hesitant. "Tamara?" Min-gyu's voice, low through the wood. "Open the door." She froze. He never came to this hallway. Never. She pushed herself up, wrapped the silk robe tighter around her pajamas, and padded across the carpet. When she cracked the door, he stood there fully dressed despite the hour. Black shirt, top 2 buttons undone, revealing the faint edge of that small tattoo curving along his collarbone. No tie, sleeves still fastened at the wrists. His hair was slightly tousled, as if he'd run a hand through it. He didn't wait for permission. He stepped inside, eyes scanning her face, then dropping to the way she held herself, curved forward, one arm wrapped protectively around her middle. "You're in pain," he said. Statement, not question. She hesitated. "It's my period. It's bad sometimes." He nodded once, expression unchanging. "Sit." She obeyed, sinking onto the edge of the bed. He disappeared into the hallway and returned less than a minute later with a small tray, a hot water bottle already wrapped in a soft towel, a steaming mug of chamomile tea, a bottle of pain relievers, and a small heating pad plugged into an extension cord he must have grabbed from somewhere. He set the tray on her nightstand, then knelt, actually knelt, in front of her without a word. He pressed the hot water bottle gently against her abdomen, guiding her hands to hold it in place. "Keep this here," he said. "It'll help." She stared at him, the powerful man who commanded rooms full of dangerous people, now on one knee, adjusting a heating pad like it was the most natural thing. The undone buttons of his shirt framed a sliver of skin, the tattoo just visible, a quiet mark against otherwise flawless control. "Thank you," she whispered. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he poured 2 pills into his palm, handed them to her with the tea. "Take these. They're the stronger kind. Safe. Prescribed." She swallowed them obediently, the warmth of the mug seeping into her fingers. He stayed there another moment, watching her face as if cataloging every flicker of discomfort. Then he rose smoothly, crossed to the thermostat, and lowered the room temperature a degree, just enough to make the heat feel more effective. "Lie down," he instructed. "Try to sleep." She eased back against the pillows, still clutching the hot water bottle. He pulled the duvet up over her shoulders with careful movements, tucking it around her like she might break if he pressed too hard. When he turned to leave, she spoke before she could stop herself. "You didn't have to do this." He paused at the door, hand on the frame. For the first time, she saw something crack in the mask, something raw and unguarded, that vanished almost instantly. "I know," he said quietly. Then he was gone, the door closing with a soft click. Tamara lay there in the dim light, heat blooming across her stomach, tea cooling on the nightstand. Her body still ached, but the sharp edges had dulled. And in the silence, she replayed the image of him kneeling, top buttons undone, voice gentle in a way she hadn't known he could be. She closed her eyes. Across the penthouse, in his own room, Min-gyu stood at the window, staring at the city lights. His shirt remained open at the collar. He hadn't bothered to fix it. He pressed 2 fingers to the pulse point at his throat, feeling the unsteady rhythm there. He told himself it was only duty, but the lie tasted thinner every day. The days after that night felt different, though nothing obvious had changed. Tamara still woke to breakfast waiting on the glass table. She still rode to campus in silence with the escorts, now tripled, shadows that never strayed more than 10 feet. She still returned by 6, ate dinner alone most evenings, and retreated to her room with textbooks and notes. But Min-gyu no longer disappeared entirely into his office the moment she arrived. He began appearing in small, deliberate ways. One evening, she found him in the living room instead of his study, sleeves of his white shirt unbuttoned at the cuffs and pushed halfway up his forearms. The faint black lines of his tattoos caught the lamplight as he stood by the bar cart, pouring 2 glasses of water. No ice, just still and clear. He set one on the coffee table opposite the couch where she usually sat to read. "Drink," he said when she hesitated in the doorway. "You've been skipping hydration since the cramps." She blinked. "You noticed?" "I notice everything." His tone was matter of fact, but he didn't look away. She sat, took the glass, sipped. He settled into the armchair across from her, not too close, not too far, legs crossed, one elbow resting on the armrest. For several minutes, neither spoke. The city lights glittered through the windows behind him like scattered stars. Eventually, she closed her textbook. "Why are you here tonight?" He considered the question. "You're quiet lately, more than usual." "I'm always quiet." "Not like this." He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees now. The top buttons of his shirt remained undone from earlier. The small tattoo on his collarbone shifted with the movement. "You're thinking too much." She met his gaze steadily. "I'm trying to understand my place here." "Your place," he repeated, voice low, "is safe. That's the only place that matters right now." "Is it?" She set the glass down carefully. "Park Ji-hoon hasn't contacted me again. Your men say the threat is handled. But I'm still locked in this building every night, still watched every second I'm outside. I don't know if I'm a guest, a prisoner, or something else." He didn't flinch from the question. "You were payment. Then you became my responsibility. Now—" He paused, jaw tightening for a fraction of a second. "Now you're something I can't ignore." The admission hung between them, heavy and unguarded. Tamara's breath caught. She searched his face for mockery, for calculation. Found neither. Only that same fierce intensity she'd glimpsed the night he knelt by her bed. He stood abruptly, crossed to the windows, hands in his pockets. "I've reviewed your midterms schedule. You'll take them in person next week. I've arranged a private room on campus. Escorts will stay outside the door. No one enters." She stared at his back. "Thank you." He turned just enough to glance over his shoulder. "Don't thank me yet. There are conditions." "Of course there are." A ghost of something, almost a smile, touched his mouth and vanished. "You text me when you arrive at each exam hall. When you leave. If anything feels off, even slightly, you call. Immediately." She nodded slowly. I can do that. Good. He moved toward the hallway that led to his wing, then stopped, looked back at her fully this time. Tamara? Yes? Sleep well tonight. It wasn't a command. It was softer, almost careful. She watched him disappear down the corridor, the echo of his footsteps fading until the penthouse swallowed the sound. Alone again, she picked up her glass, finished the water he'd brought her. Her fingers lingered on the cool rim. In his office minutes later, Mingyu sat at his desk staring at the blank screen of his laptop. He hadn't turned it on. Instead, he pulled his phone closer, opened her contact, still just Tamra, and typed a single message he never sent. You're not a prisoner. Not anymore. He deleted it, but the words stayed, burned into the quiet part of his mind he could no longer lock away. He leaned back, closed his eyes, and let himself feel it. The slow, inevitable slide from duty into obsession. There was no going back. The private exam room felt smaller than it should have. Bare walls, one long table, a single window overlooking the courtyard. Tamra sat alone with her test booklet open, pen in hand, but her mind kept drifting to the hallway beyond the door. To the 2 escorts stationed there. To the man who had arranged all of it. When the timer ended, she packed up slowly, heart beating faster than the questions warranted. She stepped into the corridor, texted him as promised. Finished. Heading out now. His reply came in seconds. Wait there. I'm coming. She stared at the screen. He had never come to campus himself. 15 minutes later, the black SUV pulled up at the side entrance. Mingyu emerged alone. No escorts this time. He wore a dark coat over his crisp shirt, top 2 buttons undone, the faint tattoo at his collarbone catching the afternoon light. He opened the passenger door for her without a word. She slid inside. He joined her, the car pulling away smoothly. The drive started in silence. Then he spoke, voice quieter than usual. How did it go? Fine. I think I did well. She glanced at him. You didn't have to come. I wanted to. Simple. Direct. She looked out the window at the passing streets. You're different lately. He didn't deny it. You're different too. She turned back to him. I'm the same, just less afraid. His fingers tightened on the wheel. Good. They didn't speak again until the elevator opened onto the penthouse. He followed her inside instead of disappearing to his office. In the living room, he stopped near the couch, hands in his pockets, watching as she set her bag down. Tamra. She faced him. The distance between them felt charged, smaller than the room suggested. He took one step closer, then another, until the scent of yuzu and espresso wrapped around her, warm and familiar now. I've fought this long enough, he said. Every day since you arrived. She stayed very still, eyes wide but steady. He lifted a hand slowly, giving her every second to step back. She didn't. His fingers brushed her cheek, then cupped it gently, thumb tracing the line of her jaw. Tell me to stop, he murmured, leaning in until their breaths mingled. She didn't speak, didn't move away. He closed the last inch, pressing his lips to hers, soft at first, careful, testing. When she remained pliant, he deepened the kiss, slow and deliberate, one hand sliding to the nape of her neck to hold her steady. She hesitated only a heartbeat before her lips parted, kissing him back tentatively, then with growing warmth. He broke away just enough to trail his mouth along her jaw, down the sensitive column of her neck. She gasped softly, a quiet sound of surprise and pleasure, her hand rising instinctively to rest on his shoulder, fingers curling into the fabric of his shirt. He paused there, lips brushing her pulse. "Do you want me to stop?" "No," she whispered, voice trembling but sure. "It feels good." The words seemed to snap the last thread of his restraint. He lifted her effortlessly, carrying her to his room, the door closing behind them with a quiet click. Inside, he set her gently on the edge of the bed and knelt before her, hands framing her face again. "We go slow. You say stop at any moment, I stop. Understand?" She nodded, eyes locked on his. He kissed her again, deeper now, coaxing, then eased her back onto the sheets. His touch remained measured, reverent, fingers tracing her collarbone, lips following the path, every movement giving her time to adjust. When he peeled away layers, he asked again, voice husky against her skin. "Still good?" "Yes," she breathed. He guided her through it with patience and care, whispering reassurances, pausing when her breath hitched, waiting until she arched toward him in silent invitation. He moved with her, slow and deliberate, watching her face for every flicker of sensation, murmuring her name like a vow when she finally trembled beneath him. Afterward, he gathered her close, pulling the sheets over them both. His hand stroked down her back in long, soothing strokes, while her breathing evened out against his chest. "You're safe," he said quietly, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Always." She curled tighter into him, a small, contented sigh escaping her lips. In the quiet dark, with her head tucked under his chin, Mingyu closed his eyes and let the truth settle. She was no longer just his responsibility. She was his. Sunlight slipped through the blinds in soft golden bands across the bed. Tamara stirred first, cheek pressed to the warm plane of Mingyu's chest. His arm curved around her like he'd never let go. His breathing stayed deep and even, one hand splayed open at the small of her back. She shifted carefully. The faint soreness between her thighs reminded her of every gentle moment from the night before, his whispered questions, the way he'd paused whenever her breath hitched, how he'd held her gaze until she relaxed into him completely. He had been unhurried, attentive, turning every touch into something safe and wanted. His eyes opened at the small movement. Dark, still drowsy, they found hers right away. "Morning," he murmured, voice gravelly. "Morning." A shy smile curved her lips. She felt suddenly aware of their shared warmth under the sheets. He lifted his hand to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, thumb brushing her cheek. "How are you feeling?" "A little sore," she admitted softly, "but happy." The word seemed to settle something in him. His expression eased, the usual sharpness giving way to quiet tenderness. He leaned in, pressing a slow kiss to her forehead, then the tip of her nose. "Tell me if anything's too much," he said. She nodded, fingers tracing the faint line of the tattoo peeking above his collarbone. "It isn't." He studied her a long moment, then rolled them gently so she rested beneath him, his weight braced on his forearms. "I want to see you again," he whispered. "All of you. I want to hold you. Just like this. Slow. No rush." She exhaled shakily, nodding. He kissed her then, deeper but still careful, building warmth with patient strokes of his tongue. His hands moved reverently, skimming her sides, cradling her close, every touch asking permission without words. He trailed kisses along her throat, pausing to murmur against her pulse. Still all right?" "Yes," she breathed, fingers sliding into his hair. He continued lower, exploring with lips and careful hands until her breath came in soft, surprised gasps. When he settled between her thighs again, he looked up, waiting. "Tell me yes," he said quietly. "Yes." He moved with the same measured care as before, slow, deliberate, watching her face for every flicker of sensation. He never hurried. When her body arched toward him, he matched her rhythm, guiding her gently higher until she trembled beneath him, a quiet cry escaping as pleasure crested over her in warm waves. He followed soon after, face buried in the curve of her neck, a low sound rumbling in his chest as he held her through the aftershocks. Afterward, he gathered her against him, pulling the sheets higher. His hand stroked down her spine in long, soothing lines, while their breathing synced. "Tamara," he said after a while, voice soft against her hair. "I don't want this to be just tonight, or tomorrow. I want you with me, every day, every morning like this. Not because of a debt, not because of rules, because you choose it." She lifted her head, meeting his eyes. He brushed his thumb over her lower lip, a small, almost boyish smile touching his mouth. "Be mine? For real this time. No cage, just us." Her heart squeezed. She leaned up to kiss him, soft, lingering. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. He exhaled like he'd been holding the breath for months. Then he wrapped both arms around her, tucking her head under his chin. "Rest now," he murmured. "We have all the time we need." She smiled into his skin, letting the steady beat of his heart lull her back toward sleep. The penthouse no longer felt borrowed. It felt like theirs. The conference room on the top floor of Mingyu's riverfront building smelled faintly of fresh coffee and polished wood. Tamara sat at one end of the long table, hands folded in her lap, wearing the same navy dress she'd had on the day she was handed over. Across from her, her father shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Flanking him were two neutral witnesses, lawyers from a respected firm. Mingyu stood at the head, sleeves of his charcoal shirt neatly buttoned today, posture straight, but calm. No threats, no raised voices, just paperwork. Her father signed first, pen scratching across the final page of the peace agreement. Territory lines redrawn, old debts canceled. The 2-year feud officially buried. He pushed the documents toward Mingyu without meeting anyone's eyes. Mingyu signed next, quick, precise strokes. Then he slid the stack to the witnesses for notarization. When the last stamp fell, he looked at her father. "It's done," he said evenly. "You're free to leave, and so is she." Her father stood and hesitated only long enough to glance at Tamara. "I'm sorry," he muttered. Then he walked out, the door closing softly behind him. The witnesses followed soon after, leaving the room empty except for the two of them. Tamara stayed seated, heart pounding in a way that had nothing to do with fear anymore. Mingyu rounded the table slowly and stopped in front of her. He pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and set it on the table between them. No grand flourish, just quiet certainty. "I don't want you to stay because you have to," he said. "I want you to stay because you choose to, every day, starting today." He opened the box. Inside rested a simple platinum band with a single oval diamond. Elegant, understated, the way he always was. No ostentatious flash, just something that caught the light and held it. "Tamara," he continued, voice low and steady, Will you marry me? Not as payment, not as obligation, just be my wife. Let me build a life with you, one where you finish your degree, walk across that stage, travel if you want, argue international law with me over dinner. One where you never have to wonder if the door is locked. Tears pricked her eyes, but she smiled through them. Yes. He exhaled like he'd been holding the breath since the first night she arrived. He took her hand, slid the ring onto her finger, it fit perfectly, and then pulled her up into his arms. She wrapped hers around his neck, pressing her forehead to his. He kissed her then, slow, deep, full of everything they'd built in the quiet spaces between fear and want. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers again. Graduation is in 3 months, he said softly. I've already booked the venue for after. Small, private, just us and whoever you want there. She laughed quietly, the sound bright in the empty room. You planned that fast. I've been planning since the night you told me it felt good, he admitted, a rare, crooked smile touching his mouth. They left the building hand in hand. No escorts trailing behind. No security detail shadowing every step. Just the two of them stepping into the late afternoon sun, the city stretching out before them like an open promise. Months later, on a quiet spring evening, Tamara stood on a small rooftop garden overlooking the Han River. She wore white silk that moved like water, the diamond on her finger catching the last light. Mingyu stood opposite her in a dark suit, top button undone, looking at her like she was the only thing in the world worth seeing. They said simple vows, promises of choice, of care, of forever without chains. When the officiant pronounced them married, he pulled her close, kissed her softly, then murmured against her lips, "Welcome home, Mrs. Shin." She smiled up at him, fingers laced through his. I already was. And as the city lights began to flicker on below them, they stood together. No debt, no feud, no cage. Just two people who had chosen each other completely.